Welcome to the Real Estate Niche Show, a show that focuses on top real estate professionals who specialize in different niches of real estate. My name is Ben Kogut. Join me as we dive deep into the professional and personal lives of the experts of the real estate industry. Welcome to the Real Estate Niche Show. I'm your host, Ben Kogut, and today, Yonah Weiss on our podcast. He is a powerhouse with property owners' tax savings. As a business director at Madison SPECS, a national cost segregation leader, he has assisted clients in saving tens of millions of dollars in taxes through cost segregation. He has a background in teaching and a passion for real estate and helping others. He's a real estate investor and host of the top podcast called Weiss Advice. Yonah, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything I missed in your bio?
There's, you gotta summarize it as much as possible. You know what I mean? Not gonna put too much in there, but no, I love it. Thanks so much for having me on. I love the title of this show, the concept behind it, Real Estate Niche Show, Ben. It's a pleasure to be joining you.
I haven't had a chance to speak about cost seg, so you're the cost seg king, and wanted to chat about that and educate everybody about that, because as we all know, it's not what you make, it's how much you get to keep. And so this is a very important topic, and so let's dive into it. So tell us, what is it that you specialize in? What's your niche?
The niche, and it's a great niche to be in, cost segregation. It's so niche that most people don't even know what it is. That's the amazing thing. But once you do know what it is, it'll blow your mind. And so that's the amazing thing that I learned when I first got into cost segregation, was that everyone that I spoke to in the real estate industry, you either knew what it was and you were using it and saving millions in taxes, or you had never heard of it. There was no middle ground. There was no middle ground of people saying, that tax strategy thing. I've heard of that. No, not for me. So I set and the majority was in that latter category. So I set my goal into educating people as much as possible over the last several years. And, thank God I've been successful in doing that. But let's talk about, what is this cost segregation thing? Essentially, it's an advanced form of depreciation. And depreciation is a tax deduction. Anyone gets, anytime you buy a building, a commercial property, it doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's not your personal residence. It can even be a house, but not your personal residence. But it's more beneficial for commercial property, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Why you get to take this depreciation deduction, and it's not what it sounds like, that it's a bad thing, like, oh, your property's going down in value, why do you want to take depreciation? No, it's actually just a tax deduction based on the concept that things go down in value as time goes on. But the IRS lets you take this deduction. Essentially what it says is you take your purchase price of, let's say, $1 million, right, building, or 10 million, whatever you want to put it at, just an easy round number. And you get to depreciate that, meaning take the tax value deduction of that $1 million over a 39-year period. Okay, that's the arbitrary number the IRS decided. Every building, you can write it off. It goes down in value, the entire building over a 39-year period, which again, it's just conceptually doesn't make sense, because you can buy a property that was built in 1950 and you can still take your full 39 years of depreciation starting the day you buy it. So that's what depreciation is. It's an amazing deduction. It helps you to lower your tax liability, increase your cash flow. Cost segregation, like I said, is an advanced form of that, essentially just breaking down the building into individual components from a tax standpoint and saying, well, wait a second, it's not just the building, the structure that has this 39-year depreciation schedule, meaning I can take it as a tax write-off over that period of time. Rather, I can break out those individual components, like, in the property, any furnishings or fixtures or light fixtures, window treatments. I mean, you talk about like an office building, for example, you have like desks, you have office furniture, you have wood, wall coverings, you have flooring, carpeting, or vinyl flooring. All that stuff is non-structural, and all of that can depreciate on a 5-year period instead of a 39-year period. So you can take that tax deduction over a much shorter time frame, which essentially just gets you bigger tax deductions up front, which means more cash flow. that's in a nutshell what it is. But again, the name cost segregation, we're segregating the cost. We're breaking down that cost into different categories that you can take tax deductions faster.
Got it. Thank you. Can you elaborate a little bit further, taking that into how does that actually manifest itself for, let's just say, LP investors typically?
Sure. So, I mean, let's talk about, first of all, how it manifests itself to the property in general, and then break it down in terms of the LP investors, because what does that mean? You get this tax deduction, you get this bigger tax write-off. Essentially what it means is that, let's say your $1 million property produces, I don't know, $60,000 of net operating income. Okay. It's be a 6 cap in layman's terms, right? Something like that. That's a pretty good deal, right, Ben? And now that 6 cap,
debatable, right? But carry on.
Now you take that $60,000 without cost segregation, your depreciation deduction, if you took that $1 million and divided over a 39-year period, would be approximately $20,000. Okay. So what that would mean if you didn't do cost segregation is you take that 60,000, subtract 20,000, and you're only paying taxes on the remaining 40. Comes cost segregation and says, well, wait a second, you can take about 20 or 30% of that upfront in the first year or the first 5 years. And now you get, instead of $20,000 a year, you're getting about $50,000 for the first 5 years, or as a lump sum in the first year, about a $200,000 or $300,000 tax write-off. So that's a big, that comes with a huge tax benefit, because essentially you've made all this money and now you have zero tax liability on it, or very little. How that plays out to the LP investors, generally speaking, if they own equity shares, and there are many different structures that can be involved, but a simple way of understanding this is if they own equity shares in the property, they will receive a percentage of that depreciation according to their percentage of ownership. So as well, and that will show up for them on their tax form. It's called the K-1 tax form. Essentially what it means is, oh, you own 10% of this property. So instead of the 60,000 total, you get 6,000 of the income. Just keeping it simple without the preferred returns and all that kind of stuff. You're getting your proportional amount of income. You'll also get your proportionate amount of deductions.
I love it. Yes, that you hit all the points I was looking for. It's been one of my favorite things about being a commercial real estate investor. And I guess let's take this even a little bit further and talk about what can you tell us about what's the difference between if you planned on owning a property for 1 year versus 5 years versus 10 years versus 20 years? Like, what is the impact going to be to you as a property owner and the LP, for example?
Well, anytime you buy property, right, you get this tax deduction. You have to understand it's not all fun and games, because it comes with a liability as well. Which is considered a gain, right? A capital gain, right? When you sell a property, whether it's over a 5-year period, after 5, 10, 20 years, doesn't matter when that is, you have a capital gain tax you have to pay if you made any profit on that sale. You also have something called depreciation recapture tax, which is considered an unrealized gain, meaning you've taken the benefit of that. You now are subject to a tax on the amount of depreciation that was taken. So if you're looking at it in a vacuum and you're looking at it on a per property, and let's say a person only owns one property and will only ever own or invest in one property until they sell it and buy another one, then yes, you have to consider the recapture tax and understand when is the most value going to be. It's probably within the first 5 to 7 years is when the most value is going to be for that, because at that point, after that point, you're getting less tax benefit because you've essentially front loaded a portion of those deductions to the earlier years. So if you imagine like a big pool of potential deductions, right? That $1 million of purchase, that's potential deductions. You can, instead of taking that over 39 equally, you can actually front load 20% of that, let's say just as a round number, into the first 5 years. Now doing that, from year 6 and onwards, you're only going to have 80% of those original $1 million to now take as a depreciation deduction. So it's going to reduce your deduction by 20% in the ensuing years. But so again, if you're just looking at it in a vacuum, that's where it will be most beneficial, because after that point, you'll have less. However, if you ever invest in any other property, or you buy any other deals during that interim or in the same year as the sale of that property, well, guess what? all of the depreciation is lumped together to offset all of the income from all of your investments, all of your rental property together. Not only that if you have, like Ben was probably referring to earlier or alluding to, was that why you love these investments, because you get not just these deductions, you actually end up getting what's called a loss. You have more deductions than you have income, and that carries forward, which means those passive losses can be used not only to offset any of that passive income from your rental income, how also it can be used to offset any passive gain. So if you have a sale of a property in the year that you you buy a property and do cost segregation in the year that you sell a property, well, those capital gains tax or those recapture tax, which again is like a capital gain, can now be offset by the cost segregation, by the depreciation, those passive deductions in the year of the sale. So again, it's not necessarily about how much you make, not even about how much you keep. It's about how can you come up with these strategies to make sure that you can, not pay taxes for as long as possible.
I love it. And can you talk about the nuance for those of us who are by the way, this is all the US based assumptions.
Mm-hmm, of course.
For those of us that are real estate professionals, is it any different for us?
It is different. And I'm glad you brought that up, because some people think that, and a lot of people have misnomers, that if you are an LP investor and you're a very high W-2 earner and stuff like that, real estate is incredible because of the tax deductions. Now, that is true to a certain extent, but it's limited. And what I mean by that is, as I mentioned in the previous comments about your depreciation offsetting your income, generally speaking, depreciation as a passive deduction, we call it passive. It's right. It's not really passive. The IRS defines it that way on Schedule E. It's going to be used to offset your quote unquote, again, passive income. That means any rental, any real estate income is considered Schedule E passive income. That being said, if you are not a real estate professional, then it's just going to be limited there. Now, that can be extremely beneficial, especially if you're making a lot of money. At least these investments, the money making and the returns from your real estate will be, very limited tax liability there, or tax-free entirely. So that's the tax benefit that comes along with it. The benefit for real estate professional, that means someone who spends the majority of their time involved in the real estate trade, either they or their spouse is involved in the real estate trade or business, get to use any of those passive losses, not only against their rental income, but also against any other income. So if you are a real estate broker, right? I highly encourage anyone who's a real estate broker, if you're listening to this, you must 100% without a doubt, invest or own commercial or residential, whatever it is, investment real estate, because you're missing out on the tax benefits. Meaning, not only are you going to get the rental income, have no tax liability, but any of those extra passive losses you now can use to offset your W-2 income or your commission income or any other income from any other source, or your spouse's income, right? So this is huge. It's probably the greatest rule in the entire tax code, in my opinion. I don't know why it's there. I don't know what it's about, but it's there so we can take advantage of it.
For all of us real estate professionals, if you didn't understand what Yonah is saying, please go back and listen to that, or find out all those amazing resources he has online, because he's preaching gold right there. Yonah, I want to ask you two more questions about this topic, which is, when does it not make sense to do a cost seg study?
The main time it doesn't make sense, and there are a few cases, and I'm glad you asked that, because it's not necessarily going to be for everyone. Number one would be if you have no income. Okay, so let's say you buy a vacant property or something like that, and you buy a piece of land. The land isn't going to get you any cost benefits from that, but a vacant property, or making major renovations, you're doing a major overhaul, capital improvements, and there's no income. So there's no reason necessarily, unless you have other investments, there's no reason necessarily to pay for this cost segregation study to get done and to get these extra deductions if you can't use them in the current year. Obviously, even if you don't use them in the current year, you can still carry them forward, meaning you can use them in the future, but it's not going to be beneficial this year, so it doesn't necessarily make sense to get it done. That's one occasion where it wouldn't make sense. Another case, I'll give two more occasions where it wouldn't make sense, or make less sense for that matter, is number one, if you're planning on holding the property for a very short time. Now, I'm not talking about a flip, because a flip is not going to be able to take depreciation, because if your intention on buying it was literally just to sell it, then that's more of a transactional you're not going to be able to get the rental income from that as the depreciation to be used against the rental income. It's just going to be considered a transactional income. However, if you're holding it for a short period, like a year or two, okay, again, this will come together with other factors, but in general, because you're going to use those depreciation deductions and then immediately get the next year, get hit with that large tax bill of the recapture tax, it may not make sense. It usually, in my opinion, it usually doesn't make sense unless you have such a huge tax bill and you expect, next year not to, or you expect or plan next year to buy another property and be able to offset that. That's really the second reason. The third case where it doesn't make sense is if people are investing in this property through retirement accounts that are already tax shelters. So, for example, 401ks or self-directed 401ks, etc., which I highly recommend. If you have a 401k, make sure that you are self-directing that. You find a custodian, there are a lot of great people out there that do this, specialize in that. Make sure your retirement account is not just sitting there, right? Roll it over, put it into a Roth IRA or to a self-directed 401k, et cetera. However, once you do that, in most cases, that's now a tax shelter in of itself. And any income that you're making from those properties is going to be, again, in that tax shelter and you're not going to benefit from the depreciation. So I have, some clients where they will have a syndication and many of the investors are coming through these tax lines. So for them, it doesn't make sense to do the cost segregation.
Nailed it. Got it all. So let's, thank you for all that. Let's pivot a little bit.
We didn't script this before, by the way.
Yeah.
you keep going, okay, great. You answered that really well.
Oh, I like I said, I'm going to give you a bunch of softballs and you're just hitting them out of the park. So thank you for that. So Yonah, let's pivot away from this topic a little bit. I don't know if you know how much you inspired me through your CRE 10-day challenge, which is you challenged pretty much everybody to post and share evergreen content on LinkedIn for 10 days in a row. The first time I jumped in, I believe, was at the beginning of 2020, right as right around the pandemic starting up. And it really changed my life. So I want to, publicly thank you for that. It got me and a group of people to start a mastermind. It got me involved with podcasting and now my own podcast. And so I just want to thank you for that. And I wanted to let's talk about that. Maybe share with everybody, what is it? And looking back on it, the success of it, what have been some lessons learned for you through being a leader with this type of thing?
So first of all, thank you. I appreciate that. It's awesome to see, and I've seen it, time and time again. And that's really part of the reason. I mean, without getting ahead of ourselves in terms of what's the reason behind that, but that is really part of the reason that I can literally help other people and really change a lot of things in people's lives through this and make it better from a business standpoint, at least. What it is, it's basically a 10-day challenge where I encourage a group of people in the commercial real estate industry. So I call it the CRE 10-day challenge or whatever. There's variations of that, but essentially specifically targeting people in our industry who aren't necessarily familiar with social media or using LinkedIn as a platform to post original content, to engage with. I came across LinkedIn about 4 years ago, and it's just literally changed my life in terms of using it as a branding, as posting. And I just want to give back. I literally just want to help people. It's not a paid thing. I know there are like these other challenges or these other like masterminds or courses out there that are really paid, and people have told me I should charge for this type of thing. But for me, I get so much more out of it by not charging people. To be honest, just have like another revenue stream. Like, okay, yeah, I may make a few bucks, but literally I get so much more out of it. Maybe it's just about me, but essentially what it is. And by the way, at the time of this recording, we actually just started a new 10-day challenge today. We're
in December 2021, y'all.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. And I do it about every 3-4 months or so, basically like once a quarter. I try to do it. And for 2 weeks straight, encourage people to, with accountability groups of people encouraging others to post. And you have a challenge. You have to make a certain threshold of engagement on your post, which is really the whole point of LinkedIn. And coupled with that is, just branching out there, getting out of your comfort zone. And I think the mindset of doing that really helps people be better at what they do. And so there's a lot of kind of psychology behind this. There's a lot of, nuances that I have in my intentions of why I do this and how helping people in various ways. But essentially the networking and meeting new people, like you said, you created a mastermind with a bunch of people that participated in this challenge back then. And I'm sure you guys have together accomplished amazing things. And to me, that means the world. Like, that's really what it's all about. Like, making new connections, introducing people. I love to see when real business, when real transactions, when real relationships, partnerships, all the above come together through this.
I know there's been, uncalculable ripple effects of the impact that you've had. And so on behalf of everybody, thank you for being a leader in this space. It's really, really cool. And let's keep talking about that, because I know that you have started your own podcast. And as I mentioned, I'm new to it, and I'm wondering what is it? Tell us about it, and what have been some of the lessons learned on that journey.
So Weiss Advice, so that's the name of the podcast. It really, more than anything, was just a way for me to connect with people, right, that I like. My friends, people, colleagues, clients, things like that, people that I want to connect with through this medium of podcasting, simultaneously adding value to all the listeners. And, thank God we have a pretty good following, pretty good listenership. I don't know exactly how many people per episode or per month or whatever like that, but it's in the thousands. Like, it's great. It's good to see that it's taken traction and we're actually adding value and helping people. I stumbled upon podcasting as a guest when I was asked several years ago to be a guest on a podcast. And I didn't really know what that was at the time. I'd heard podcasting, but it opened up a whole world to me. And being a guest on that first podcast really inspired me to recognize the power of this medium. And I ended up being a guest, on many, many more after that. And to date, over 200 podcasts. I stopped counting at a certain point, being a guest. And it encouraged me to start my own, because I love the medium. I loved being able to talk to people, and I enjoy asking questions as well. I enjoy the conversations in general. So, it's more of a back and forth. If you listen to my podcast, you will be able to tell very clearly that it literally is it's just conversational. I mean, there's very little pre-thought questions that I'm asking people. It's 99% of the time, the people I'm interviewing are people that I already know, people I've had conversations with before, I've met in person, clients of mine, et cetera. So it makes the conversations that much easier, right? But so it's less than, like your podcast, Real Estate Niche Show, and so many others out there that have their own niche, and their own thing where you can actually learn and educate yourself. Mine is more, you want to get to know the person. Oh, come listen to my podcast. We'll get to know them and like what they're all about. And so that's kind of how I look at like a talk show, so to speak. It is in the real estate world, because basically that's the common denominator of all the guests, but it's less educational and informative in that respect.
Love it, and agree with that format as well. So that is like a perfect segue into kind of the next, let's call it a wind down, but it's more personal, which is, here's the first question. How does Yonah Weiss invest in himself?
I think on a daily basis, it's so important. I mean, I'm a very religious, very spiritual person. I truly believe that everything that I do has meaning. And by spending time, praying and studying and giving back, through charity and these kind of things are really, inspiring me, on a daily basis. And so that's how I'm investing in myself, by continually growing through those mediums. And I think that's the main thing.
Okay. And the next question is how, in addition to what you've already shared, how do you like to invest in the community?
Investing in the community in terms of people. I mean, I started a nonprofit organization many, many years ago, about 10 years ago, and, try to help people in need. I was in a space in my life at that time where I was struggling financially and, had a big family, and I saw many other people who were in the same situation and wanted to just start this organization, nonprofit, and people who were struggling with medical issues, or they had bills that they couldn't pay because of that, or, had a death or a health issue in the family and just needed literally financial support. I mean, it can happen to anyone literally. And if you don't have a support system, you don't have anything. So that's the main way that I like to give back.
Very nice. And how does Yonah Weiss define the word success?
To me, it's an ever changing definition. But right now, I would say, and if you go back and listen, I actually have a similar question on my podcast, and I did my own interview of myself, right? And no, I asked you, I asked every guest, but I asked myself also at one point, and I don't even remember what I said on that episode. So if anyone wants to go back and double check this, cross-reference and see if it's the same or a different answer, feel free to get back to me. But right now, success to me means helping other people, right? I get so much out of, like you said, we have a word in Hebrew, nachas, right? Or Yiddish, which is like just to have that feeling of accomplishment when you see someone else succeeding, right? And you know that you had something to do with that you encouraged them, or that you gave them good words, or that you helped them in a certain way. To me, that's really what life's all about. And so for me, that's success. If I can help make an introduction to someone, that, every single day, that's one of my goals to do every day, to make one introduction. That's successful to me.
I love that. You touched on something that I'm a little curious about. What other goals do you have?
I don't really have many goals in terms of that. I mean, I don't sit down. I'm not a type of person that sits down and writes goals. It's just kind of in my head. Like, I know that making a difference in other people's lives, will be one goal I do have, to be honest. The one thing that literally I've said is, I want to be able to write, I said last year, I said a 6-figure check to charity, right? Because that to me is already I've accomplished something big if I can, be able to do that and give back in that way. Now I think I'm going to put it and lift it up to 7-figure, right? We'll put it at that. That's a goal of mine.
Love that. Incredible. Wonderful. Well, would you mind sharing with everybody how they may be able to get a hold of you if they wanted to?
Best way is on LinkedIn. Obviously, reach out to me. I'm very, very active on that platform. You can also go to YonahWeiss.com. I'm all the socials also. So if you reach out to me, let me know that you listened to the Real Estate Niche Show, and I will make sure to connect with you.
Well, on that note, Yonah, thank you so much for being on the show, for being a leader in our community, for just being an overall mensch. Is there anything else, any other words of wisdom that you might want to be able to share with us as we wind it down?
I mean, we've touched on it, but I'll just reiterate, look outside yourself, see how you can help other people. And believe me, if it's not natural to you, just do it every day and it will become natural and it will change your life.
All right, guys, you hear that? So, Yonah, thanks. And that'll be our episode of the Real Estate Niche Show. Until then, I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Talk soon. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Real Estate Niche Show. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me or the show, you can follow me on Instagram at Ben Kogut and at The Real Estate Niche Show. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.